I'm Brad King, and this is Stories in Steel. On this episode of Stories in Steel, we visit Meridian, Idaho, and sit down with builder-fabricator Tim Ketlinski of Qualifab Inc. He tells how his parents inspired him at a young age to pursue his goals, how others have mentored him to become the master he is, and how one cannot have enough hobbies. One thing is for certain, this dude abides. Jimmy, it's good to have you on here, man.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
And this is kind of funny because we hadn't met before. I'd heard your name, but I didn't really know anything about you, and I'm a bit blown away. I'm impressed. You are one of my people. This is good. Okay, you sell parts, you build hot rods. I'm not really sure what you race. I'm not sure really what all you cover. What all do you cover?
Well, I work on just about everything, it seems like, anymore, because I've always thought that a car, boat, off-road, they all have the same mechanical principles of everything. So it's just applying different sets of boundaries to a certain project, if you will. And so I've always been a gearhead my entire life, ever since I was a small kid. And if I think you always equate it to your parents, because I got it all from my dad.
Your dad was a gearhead then?
Oh, totally. Okay. But he was a gearhead when he was a kid, but he, and in his later life was even a gearhead, but he was age 24 and had 4 kids. So he decided to put himself through college. Then he got a master's degree in electrical engineering. And so he furthered himself in college, but I always was in the garage as a kid with him, working on his daily drivers to keep him running, because he couldn't afford to pay somebody else to keep stuff running.
So you were slave labor.
It was fun to me. I mean, everything that had to do with the garage and tools. And ever since I was the youngest kid, I took everything apart, wanted to know how it worked, and put it back together.
So that's been your thing then from the beginning.
Yes, I am completely fascinated with how everything works.
So what did you start with? Obviously you got into cars young, so where did this whole thing start?
Bicycles, believe it or not. Okay. I was lived in Southern California, and I was very much into the BMX thing. And 3rd or 4th grade, your parents would let you ride your bikes all over. We rode to this empty parking lot or dirt parking lot in a supermarket store where they had jumps and all that stuff. But I would take my own coaster brake rims apart, completely disassemble them, clean all the bearings, and put everything back together. And I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And the sprockets and the bearings, and kept everything clean and lubricated. And, I always used this can of gunk parts cleaner to clean all the stuff, and my dad would get so pissed off when he came home and he smelled gunk in the house, right? So I learned really quickly to take the can of gunk and go outside and use it and rinse all the parts off.
You're in your bedroom buying parts. That's awesome.
Yeah. So always was into bicycles, and my family moved up here in 77, and so I had my driver's license when I was 14.
So where did you come from? What part?
Southern California, Huntington Beach area. Okay. My dad and my mom had just had enough of the rat race down there in 76 to say, forget it, pack it up, move to Idaho, and been here ever since.
You made it work, obviously.
I'm pretty lucky to do this stuff.
So you obviously brought your knowledge with you. You guys moved up here, you're a kid going, okay, let's keep going here. So did you get into cars pretty young?
So I got my driver's license when I was 14, and I went to a private Catholic high school, which I had to work at in the summertime to pay my own tuition to go to high school.
Okay.
And so there was always some money left over, and so my first car was basically a 55 Chevy. My dad, since he was a gearhead, thought, oh, this is the perfect car for him. It's a 55 Chevy Project, 6-cylinder, 3-speed. And so I bought that, and I immediately took the engine out of it. And I was always a kid, but I knew how to do stuff. I've always used tools, take lawnmowers apart, this, that, and the other thing. But So that was my first car, but what was so funny about that was my dad would never allow me to have a V8 until I was 18 because he knew I would probably kill myself because I'd race it or wreck it, whatever. So strictly forbidden to have a V8. But by the time I was 18, I already had something built ready to put in it.
How did you have the 6-cylinder working okay? You had to have worked on it.
Yes. So it was a 235-6, and I found a 3 1-barrel Offenhauser intake. But he said that was the thing. He said you could never hot rod the 6-cylinder, so that's what I did. So I put a 3 1-barrel Offie intake on it, and I put a Fenton split cast iron exhaust manifold on it with glass packs. You could hear it all over town, but it was a fun car to drive, unique. And then, like I say, when I was 18, I already had a Muncie set up for it. 327 and a 12-bolt out of a Camaro to put in it.
Oh, you were ready to rock and roll by your birthday.
Yeah, I went to auto mechanics school. So at the Catholic school I went to, I had to go to a public school to take auto mechanic classes because they didn't have any of that. So that's where a lot of my friends were in, just a Boise school district. So I met a lot of gearhead guys through there and hung out with those guys. And that's where I started to really like cars and all that stuff.
You could compare notes with what you knew with what they knew.
Yeah, I had a buddy that had a 68 Camaro that was a pretty nice piece. It ran really good, and he knew a lot more about engines, and he was able to afford taking the cylinder heads in and having them worked on. And it was just a great learning experience to be the guy in the background and learn, how everything like that worked.
So did you get into racing while you were young? When did that? Because now you're 18, you got a small block, and you're 55. Now it's a little more of a hot rod.
So I eventually graduated high school, and I went to college for a couple of years, and I went to an auto mechanics program.
Okay.
So I did that, and I found out pretty quick that I don't mind getting dirty, I didn't want to be greasy. So I thought mechanics wasn't necessarily the thing for me. So I went to work after school to my dad's business, and he started his own business, but he was always building his own equipment. And so he put me in the back because he always knew I was into model cars and taking things apart and building stuff. And he goes, "Here's a red Lincoln Buzz box, here's a cutting torch, a chop saw, you draw," and he goes, "I want you to make this." And just one thing led to another, and that's what I really started to find my niche, was that kind of stuff.
Fabrication, you could build things.
Build things, yeah. And I enjoyed it. I taught myself pretty much how to do everything, starting with that. And then just one day I decided I wanted to build a drag-only car. So I ended up finding another 55 Chevy that I built another engine for. I bought a motor kit out of PAW.
Okay.
The mail order place.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I bought an engine, had a Ford 9-inch put in it. It was a nice car. It ran 1250s. Had a lot of fun with it. Flat towed it to the track. It was a nice car. I did a lot of innovative stuff, I think, for myself. I built my own tubular core support, got rid of all that stock stuff, and built something tubular that holds a cross-flow radiator in it, and just made a lot of my own stuff to put on it, my own spin, if you will.
Right on.
So
it kept evolving.
Yeah, I ended up racing that car, but I got kind of tired of it. Was a strip-only car. So I decided that I wanted to build something more where I could drive on the street. So I ended up finding a 67 Chevy 2 that I wanted to build a more real street strip car that was pro-streeted. So I did first time I ever did a mini tub on a 67 Nova. I figured out that if you undrilled all the spot welds and the frame rails in the back, you can manipulate, cut this, that, and change all the stock sheet metal around that, and you can put a 12-inch wide wheel in the back of it.
Okay.
So I did that and started bending my own roll cage for it, and it turned out to be a really nice car. It ran 1070s in 1988. which was pretty fast for a street car.
That's a good car.
So supercharged, small block with an automatic. Had a lot of fun in that. It was a fun car. It's still around today, believe it or not.
So what were you doing for money then? Were you still doing your own thing? Or were you
No, I worked for my dad for a while after that, full time. But it wasn't until I was and I had, like I said, I started to learn how to become more proficient at TIG welding and bending metal and learning ideas. And I read a lot of books when I was a kid. Because there was never any YouTube or
right.
There wasn't nothing.
There was nothing.
And especially being here in Boise, there weren't any guys. There was a couple of guys, but there was not like one guy I could just go to and teach me how to do this. So I had to learn everything myself. So I bought a lot of books.
So you were talking about being a kid and reading a lot, which was huge in my world. I read a lot because we didn't have internet, and there was 3 channels on TV. So you read. I spent a lot of time at the library.
Exactly.
A lot of time doing research. So was there any books that inspired you in your life that you can look back that you go, yeah, this book kind of inspired me to do what I do?
So my mom would always go to like thrift stores. And I always went with her because, you're a kid, you're hanging around your mom. And I found this book. It was called The Builder's Guide to Engine Swapping. It was a small little book about this big. And it listed out how to swap engines in cars. And it was all early stuff, Studebaker, Lincolns, Mercury Edsels, putting different engines in this book. And I was completely blown away by this book. It explained driveline angles. So I was a really young kid, but I had this book and I go, wow, this is the coolest book I've ever seen. And I read it a million times and taught myself. There was one book in particular, Ron Fournier, Metal Fabricating Basics. I must have read that book 1,000 times and gleaned as much information of just how to metal shape, bend tubing. And so I just continually buy more and more books where I just taught myself how to do everything, it seems like. And then where my shop was, where I was working for my dad at, there was a guy who worked across the alleyway who was a professional welder and machinist. And I learned a lot of stuff from him. His name was Doug Rank, and he was very gracious with teaching me how to use a mill, a lathe, really honing your TIG welding skills and how to weld things together so they don't pull and stretch and do all this stuff. So I learned a lot from him because he just happened to be the right guy at the right time.
That's awesome. I mean,
it was. Wow. And that was, if there was ever a mentorship kind of guy, he was always willing to teach me how to do stuff. So I learned a lot of information from him.
Now, how old were you when this was going on?
I think like 22, 21, perfect. Somewhere in that. I was perfect a sponge. Time. I would take any time I could get a piece of information, I would take it from anybody. And then, so with this one particular 55 Chevy, I built the engine myself with the PAW kit, but I never thought it really ran that great. So I had a buddy of mine who was in the cars, and he took me down to this other guy's house. His name was Mike Montgomery, and he's been my engine builder ever since 1984. He was another guy in my life that's taught me more about cars and learning stuff, how to look. It's the most important thing you ever taught me is take your eyes and how to look at things. Because when you look at something, it'll tell you everything you need to know. His buddy, Bill Wilson, was the engine machinist. It was just the blossoming of a great friendship between Mike and I, because we always shared a lot of the same passion for racing, because Mike was a 60s drag racer. You go to his house and it was like, wow, this is just like the holy grail of cool stuff.
You get to learn.
Yeah.
So back to Bill. So you were talking about Bill, and I kind of interrupted you. So
Bill was and this is the funny thing about Mike. Mike was an Eddie's bread salesman, was his day job.
Okay.
Building race engines was his thing at night. Second job, but Bill was also a heavy equipment mechanic, but ran his own machine shop at night. And the way Mike and Bill got together was Mike was a racer, Bill was a racer, and they could never find anybody they felt qualified to machine their parts the way they wanted them machined. So Bill started buying all his own equipment, and Bill went to a school to teach him engine machining. And like I say, Bill was not a man of many words, and unfortunately he passed away about a year ago, but I learned a lot from him too about just precision and appreciating, looking at things, and just how to make things better. I try to help as many people as I can, teach them or whatever they want to learn. I've had shadows from high schools follow me around for a couple of days and stuff like that, but I think it's important to share. Everybody takes the information and does what they want with the information differently. So like I say, I was just a sponge. I wanted to know how to do everything myself. And I always figured I could buy my own tools and learn how to do it myself. And, I burned up a lot of stuff, wrecked a lot of tubing.
Wrecked a lot of stuff,
but I learned how to do it.
So so you worked for your dad, you were doing dad stuff. Did you decide to go out on your own from dad's, or were you still working for other people?
No, so I was working with my dad, and my dad always was farting around with cars of some kind. He was, into street rods. And so I ended up working on some of his stuff after hours and stuff. So it started to become a progression. He let me work in the shop on the weekends on my stuff, use the equipment, as long as I kept everything clean and, made everything the way it back was Monday. So I started working on my own stuff on weekends, started working on his stuff. And next thing you know, a day here and a day there during the week, I'm working on his stuff. And one day him and his sister decided to get a wild hare, and they wanted to do the Great American Race, which is the cross-country old car race. Right. So they wanted to build a car, and so they found this 36 Chrysler Airflow. And basically, Ed Hegarty, my dad got the car from him, drug it up here, and he goes, "Here you go. Here's the car that we're going to run. You're going to have to take it all apart and put it together and make it work." And so my dad was able to find a couple of guys, because Chrysler Airflow parts are really hard to find.
I was going to say, just finding the car was kind of a stroke of luck.
So they ended up finding the taillights, which is really hard to find, and the grill and everything. Mike Montgomery and Bill Wilson did the machine work on the engine, transmission, rear end. And I did some of the metal replacement, but I sent the body off to get painted. But, I sandblasted the frame, painted the frame, wired the car, put the whole car back together, and got it ready to drag across the country. I actually did it twice, from Norfolk, Virginia to Costa Mesa, I think, one time. Wow. So did that. So that's where I started to do more restoration type stuff and doing that. But I was still building and messing around in my own cars, and there was a brief spell for a long time I was into Volkswagens. I think everybody and their brother worked on Volkswagens, and I still have Volkswagens today, and I loved Volkswagens. We had a group of guys here in town. We all caravanned to Buggerama in Sacramento, did a lot of Pleasanton Volkswagen shows. So I took those apart, did a lot of work on those, restored them, and cut your teeth on stuff like that, which is a fairly simple car to work on. Right. So I enjoyed that.
So is that what led into what got you into your own business then?
It wasn't until I was about 28. So I like 21. I've been messing around with cars since I was 14 to about 28, but I started doing more and more and more. And it wasn't until how am I going to word this? It wasn't until I figured out, instead of, partying on a Saturday or hanging out with my friends, just doing nothing, I could go down to the shop and make $600 on a weekend. So that was when the light started to come on about how I could work a Saturday and Sunday, make $600.
And feed your really expensive habits.
Right, and that's exactly right. That's what kind of led me into being able to afford more and more nicer race car engine stuff and other race cars. And so I started just doing that on the weekend. And if there was a story where your hobby turned into your means if you will.
Okay.
It's how it started. My hobby turned into a career.
That's awesome.
I like it. There's a lot of great aspects to it that I love, and being creative, waking up every morning and feeling blessed that I can go to work and make and create stuff is the greatest feeling I ever have. Is that I feel so lucky to just take stuff apart and put it together, make it better, and
Right.
it works. And it goes fast, it's safe, and it's everything that you want and a feeling of accomplishment.
That's awesome. So so where did the shop, I mean, you're in a pretty big building here now. So where did you start at?
So in 2020, I started Qualifab in 1995. I started doing more and more stuff, and so I was working less and less for my dad and more for myself.
Okay. What is Qualifab? What is the name?
It was just a name that I thought up of a company at the time, and I didn't know any better. I maybe should have called it something else. It was just...
I mean, I didn't know if it had a particular meaning. Or
It really didn't. It just, I liked doing nice work. I've always told myself that I like to work on everybody's stuff if it was mine, because that's the standard that has to be met. If it's good enough for me, it's certainly good enough for you.
Okay.
I like to think.
That's a good attitude. That's a good attitude.
Because my standards are always pretty high when it comes to just the way things are put together.
Yes, they are. I will give you that.
So 95, started doing more and more. I did a lot of full car restorations, Volkswagens, old Mercedes, Porsches, anything that. And that I started doing, a lot of Volkswagens. It was just restoration stuff where I took the car apart, did all the mechanicals. I did a lot of Volkswagen engines by myself back then. I painted some cars back then. I dabbled in that. But I learned really quick that just wasn't I could never figure out the longboard for sanding stuff. So I learned really quick that just wasn't for me, painting cars, but taking them apart, putting them together, improving on some things, making they drove nice and everything worked like it was supposed to. And I did that for a lot of years. So I started doing a lot more roll bars and roll cages. And what was funny, I was doing them back in the 96, 97, where if somebody bought a kit, I would install a roll cage and subframe connector for like $300. TIG welded, nice.
Dude.
And
nothing like working for minimum wage.
well, that was a lot of money for me back. I mean, that was a weekend's worth of work and then, slowly the things progressed, started doing way more roll cages. Then I had a buddy who had a 69 Camaro, and this was, if I have a top 10 list of cars I've ever built, this would certainly be one of a 69 Camaro. We did a full back half on it, fabricated 9-inch, had a Donovan 572, Lenco 4-speed.
Nice.
Mike Montgomery did all the engine work on it. It was a really nice, I did all the tin work in it, and everything was held together with polished button head screws. It was all black with polished screws. I had really started to hone my craft with the sheet metal work of installing wheel tubs and bead rolling, and just got more and more into that, making aluminum door panels and making motor plates, and just becoming more and more familiar with the whole aspects of a hot rod or a street, a race car type stuff.
Right.
So I started everything just slowly progressed. You learn more and more, read more and more, and and you just learn how to do it. And certainly to know what nice looking stuff looks like. I don't think that a lot of people really know when they look at a nice looking race car, how nice a nice looking race car is. It's a piece of art.
Absolutely.
It's just beautiful. And there was actually one guy that moved to town after a period of time, and his name was Steve Kukas. And I had a buddy of mine, Steve did some work on his car, and I was so overly over the top of how impressed when Steve worked on something, how nice it was. And that gave me the drive to get to a level where he was at, because his stuff was just freaking gorgeous. His welds, sheet metal work, it was just like, wow. I was just completely blown away. And he was one of the, I never told him that, but we're friends, and he fed me some information, and I tried to hang around his shop as much as I could, but I don't think he ever went for that. But I just learned a lot from him and how he approached things, and I could just look at his work and you learn a lot from somebody by looking at somebody else's work.
Absolutely.
So,
because there's your level. I do that just from my thing. You look at it and you go, oh, God, I got to step my game up. I mean,
right. And that was where I just started learning to hone more and more about just, about how things should look and what just nice fitting sheet metal looks like, how Zeus buttons are supposed to work correctly. They're not, and it's just all the small things that matter. So
look at you. That's awesome.
So yeah.
So this Nova behind me, you said it was one of the faster street cars in Idaho for a while.
Yep. So I decided after I had this one Chevy 2 that ran in the 10.7s that I wanted to build something faster. So I decided to I bought a Chris Olson Chassis Works full frame kit, and I started putting the car together. I put a funny car cage in it, and by then believe it or not, I had a Hausfeld tubing bender. So I learned how to use it all myself, and it was, just a Hausfeld's a very crude piece of equipment, not like what they have today. And that was just another thing, is when I started, you just couldn't go on the internet and buy whatever tool you wanted. So I had my own Hausfeld bender. So I bought a Chassis Works kit with an A-arm front end, 4-link rear kit, and I started putting this car together. And then Mike was still building my engine. He was building me a 510 supercharged big block for it with a Lenco 4-speed I was going to put in it. And the conversation changed when I decided what I was going to decide to do with the headers, because the headers weren't going to work on a front control arm car. So then I figured, well, this whole car has already gone past what I was wanting. It's just gotten away from being a 9-second car to something else with the engine and the transmission. So Mike was always preaching to me about Pro Stock, and Mike Montgomery loved Pro Stock, and so he was actually kind of buddies with Willie Rells in Sun Valley, California. So Mike was talking to Willie, and Willie had a 68 Camaro for sale down there. Said, Mike, you need to look at this car. You need to look at this car because it's got a strut front end on it. Funny car cage. It's a 6.0 deal. It's badass. So, okay, me and Mike jump on an airplane. I go down and meet Willie. I didn't like the car. Because it had some things on it I just didn't like. So, you know how it goes. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of asking how much it was going to cost. I thought, okay, well, I can sell the car that I already had about mostly halfway done. I sold it. And I go, okay, let's build a Chevy 2. You're going to build me the frame and make it a roller, and I'll finish up everything else. And it's 25.1, runs 720 to 190 on street tires and mufflers 20 years ago. Mike built a really impressive engine in 1998 for a conventional headed big block. It was 1,108 horsepower, which was pretty stout for a Dart 410 cylinder head. Dual fours, all the good stuff in it. And I bought everything for the car, brand new. And that was just a lot of bologna and cheese eating days, sandwich days.
Right. Mac and cheese.
Right.
Yeah.
And by that time I had started building cars on the weekends, and I built a car a year to sell. So I would do two a year every maybe of just building and selling cars.
To feed the habit.
Right. And I just wanted to do the street racing thing more, and it just started to, back then in 99 till 2003, it was in its infancy, where you actually had to drive the cars on the street.
It's a fast street car.
It was a lot of, it was a lot of fun. So it has a titanium bell housing in it, Lenco 5-speed, I bought all that stuff brand new, and it was just like for a 35-year-old kid, it was just staggering. But I wanted to do it right. And so got the car mostly all the way done, and I thought to myself, there's no way that I'm gonna get in a car like that without some better training. So I decided to go to Frank Hawley's drag racing school. And it was probably the best thing I ever done, really. And so got my license there, and it taught me a lot to learn how to drive a car like that, because I'm going from 10 seconds to 8/20s first time out. We got better, and then there wasn't until the news at Firebird, and the news put on a street race every year called the Street Machine Nationals, and I raced in a lot of that. It was just everybody who had a fast street car could race in this race, and you had to drive up and down the track so many times to make sure the car could driven on the street. But raced a lot of those and won a few of those. But it wasn't until Bill New came up with this idea where he was going to put on a king of the street race. And there was another guy here in town named Paul Brown who was a really badass street racer, and he was a hardcore street racer, and he had an 8-second. It was an 8-second subcompact. But so Bill knew we had raced at one of these street machines together, and I beat him. And so Bill New had the great idea of coming up with a king of the street race, where the winner of the race, it was the best 2 out of 3. The winner got to eat at the Stagecoach, which was a fancy steakhouse in Garden City, and the loser got to eat at McDonald's. So my car was running 8/20s, and I knew that Paul Brown's car could easily run in the low 8s, high 7s. And so a buddy of mine, Tim Wallace, goes, "Hey, I got something for you that will make sure that you're covered." So he gave me a dual nitrous plate setup. So I put the nitrous kit on it, and the car reacted completely different. It's just what the car needed was an extra 300 horsepower to make the tires work.
It actually worked?
I went from an 820 to a 770.
Wow.
That fast. And that was enough for me to win that race. So,
Was he shocked?
Yeah, Paul was pretty mad. It was just a good all-around deal. Stuff like that was always a lot of fun.
Well, everybody wants bragging, right? You always want to talk smack to your friends.
Sure. And it was good. It was really good times back then. And I was able to race in Canada. Canada had a really good street racing program. Went up there to Mission, where it was more sea level, and my car ran a lot faster. I think it ran 7.1s. And I actually won a Wally, which was really cool. That was like one of the ultimate goals for me and Mike Montgomery both, was to actually have a Wally sitting on your mantle. So did that, and by about that time I was into this building, and things just started to roll more and more and more, because I used to work for myself, and then I had one guy working for me and then another guy working for me, and the racing thing just kind of got pushed back a little bit, because that's a whole another full-time job in itself.
Right.
So
that's kind of where you are now. Now you're building really nice street cars. I mean, it looked like they're pretty much street cars, some trailer queens, but drivers. Perfect.
Yeah. And it started out where I was just doing a lot of roll cages, quick, easy in and out jobs. I would call them in and out rust repair panels, wiring, brake lines, just simple jobs, 1 or 2, 3 day jobs. And for some reason, I can't even explain to you when, everything kind of changed, where I started doing more and more of these full on car builds, where now you're doing everything. You're taking them apart, putting them back together. I farm a lot of my paint stuff out to get done, because I don't have the patience for it.
Well, plus, that's not your forte. You find somebody it is, and it makes your stuff look even better.
Right. So that's exactly right. And so I started doing more and more restorations, and I honestly can't even count how many really nice cars I've built over the years. It's a lot. And I've always done it for creating new ideas and be inventive. And, I think that everybody that builds cars has a very specific style of what they're after. And I have a very distinct style of how I like. If a customer gives me, just build it the way you want it. I have a very specific style. I like very much stock looking cars that maintain their trim, and that's what gives to me, always gives a 60s car like this car behind us is character. It's just the trim, the period correct paint, but if you look underneath it, it's got badass suspension, all aluminum, 488 Keith Craft big block Ford, FE Ford in it, Jericho 4-speed. It runs, but it looks cool, but it runs good. And that's what I've always liked, is just the sleeper aspect of cars. That's what I like, just keeping them like that. So
you've been doing this. What do you have for goals? You're getting any goals left you haven't chased that you really want to go after? I know, big question.
I have a lot of projects for myself that I would like to get done, but I'm just pretty burnt out at the end of the week. I have a 70 Chevelle SS 454 that I'm got the frame done, and I'm getting it ready to paint the underside of the body, but it's just I want to get that done. I have a few more boats I want to put together. I got involved into boats here about 10 years ago, jet drives and V drives specifically.
Okay.
So that's just another spin of my business here, as I work on a lot of boats, put a lot of boats together, rig them. I've always liked that because my dad was always that's just another throwback to your father. My dad always enjoyed going to the Colorado River. He would never afford his own boat. He borrowed a boat, so family vacations were always in this place called Cottonwood Cove. So I remember all of that, and then I got into boats, and then I had some other buddies up here, the Miniger family, drug me down to Needles, the Colorado River, and that's where I met a lot of the boat guys and the Colorado River people guys, and became friends with all those guys. And that's always been cool, is just meeting the people that are really, really passionate about what they do. One of the aspects that I really like is I've always worked with a lot of really great guys that have worked here. And Bill Culver, Steve Hansen, Matt Whitlock, some of the most incredibly talented guys I've ever worked with. A lot of them came from shops in Southern California, and you learn a lot just from your coworkers. And I've always enjoyed that too.
Right.
So that's just another thing. It's just every day you learn something, and if anything makes you happy, it's just learning something new every day. And I certainly get that. If you want to get a philosophical on stuff, I think the most important thing that a lot of people today don't appreciate is the feeling of being fulfilled by starting something and finishing it. Finishing something, a project, to me is the feeling of accomplishment, along with learning new things every day, is the best feeling you can ever have in your life, of just knowing that you overcame all the obstacles, fought, overcame, adapted, and you did it, and you came out winning. And it's the best feeling in the world for me, is that. And like I said, just being fortunate enough to do this is every morning you wake up and you just feel good, and you go to bed
tired, beat up,
and you lay your head on the pillow, and you know that you gave it 110%.
Right.
And that's what makes you feel good. And like I say, I tell this to only a certain amount of people, but most people don't know this, but I am the luckiest bastard on the planet Earth to do this and to have those feelings and be able to feel that way. So see, I'm getting emotional.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You can be emotional. It's who you are, but it's who you are. This is good.
So
it's good to get up in the morning and enjoy what you do with your life.
It is, and if more people, I always talk to a lot of people, and there's now, I hate my job. I go, well, if you had an opportunity to do whatever you wanted to do, what could you do? Or
dude, you did good. You did good.
So I've had a lot of guys here. I go, you can come down here on a Saturday and sit at that welding table and burn a bottle of gas up if you want to go practice, but very few of them ever do.
Yeah.
I would have thrived having an opportunity to work in a place or even hang around a place like this when I was a kid, because I just loved everything mechanical. So I still do today.
Timmy, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Brad. It was
Absolutely.
awesome.
It was great.